You want to know what betrayal sounds like? It's not loud. It's not a chant at a rally. It's the sound of nothing at all. Across the American heartland, the counties that once powered Donald Trump's rise, the towns that turned barns into campaign arenas and farm fields into seas of waving flags, are now swallowed by an eerie, relentless quiet. No engines, no deals, just empty silos, idle tractors, and the hollow echo of promises made. In 2020, these farmers believed they were on the winning side. In 2025, they are living through a nightmare nobody warned them about. If you think this crisis is just about numbers, you're about to see how an entire way of life is disappearing, almost overnight. Let's rewind. It all began with what was sold as a show of strength, a trade war to bring China to its knees and put America first. But as tariffs landed, it wasn't Beijing that paid the price. It was family farms in Iowa, Missouri, Indiana, and Nebraska. These weren't just statistics. They were multi-generational legacies suddenly at risk. Overnight, small operations, the backbone of our entire food system, were caught in a squeeze. The reality? Protectionism didn't shield them. It cracked their foundations. And where was that winning feeling everyone had been promised? But here's the catch. Most farmers hung on. They told themselves the pain would pass. In 2018, when the first salvo of tariffs hit soybeans, China, America's biggest customer, shot back. Demand tanked. Prices crashed. Farmers, deep in debt from advanced purchases of seed and fertilizer, sat on mountains of unsold beans and bills they couldn't pay. Within 2 years, U.S. farm bankruptcies spiked by nearly a quarter. Losses topped $27 billion. But even as their bank accounts shrank, faith in Trump barely wavered. They waited for China to cave, for a better deal to appear. But never happened. Instead, China pivoted. Brazil swept in, and by 2024, over 70% of China's soybean imports were coming from South America. Not the U.S. America went from powerhouse to afterthought in just a few seasons. But somehow, when the 2024 election rolled around, Trump still dominated in almost every farming-dependent county, winning everywhere but 11 out of 444. Loyalty, even in crisis, is a powerful thing. Now, the script has flipped again. In 2025, Trump doubled down on tariffs, this time wider, harsher, and with no bailout in sight. China, Canada, and Mexico all retaliated. But here's the difference. This time, it's the small farms that are getting crushed first. Remember that $28 billion in emergency payments back in the first trade war? Most of that money went to the top 10% of farms, giant corporations raking in million-dollar handouts, while the little guys got scraps. In fact, between 2017 and 2022, the number of farms under 10 acres shrank by 14%, while big agribusinesses grew even bigger. The message couldn't be clearer. The government picked winners, and small family farms weren't on the list. This year, history's not just repeating, it's accelerating. In April, China abruptly canceled a record pork order from the U.S., 12,000 metric tons, wiped off the books in a single stroke. Midwest farmers, already reeling, were left with perishable stock and no buyers. At the same time, corn and soybean growers scrapped plans to expand, as costs for fertilizer and equipment soared by up to 40%, thanks, ironically, to more tariffs. Even a 90-day truce on Chinese tariffs brought little relief. American soy, still facing 10% tariffs, and Brazilian competitors flush with record supply, simply couldn't break back into the market. The future? Export-dependent farms are bracing for another autumn of overproduction and nowhere to send their crops. This isn't just a soybean story. It's corn, wheat, rice, pork, beef, and dairy, all trapped in the crossfire. Minnesota corn farmers are hedging with early wheat or cutting acreage. Kansas wheat is being dumped for pennies into ethanol. Arkansas rice can't clear customs in Southeast Asia, undercut by tariff-free Thai exporters. Poor producers are bleeding cash as China and other buyers walk away. U.S. pork exports have lost billions since 2018. Even beef is now at risk, with Canada and Mexico signaling new retaliatory tariffs. And in dairy, the outlook is even bleaker. U.S. dairy exports, worth over $8 billion just last year, now face huge new tariffs from China, Canada, and Mexico. With Chinese dairy tariffs at 84%, American milk is piling up, prices are collapsing, and more dairies are closing every month. What makes this crisis different from the last? Silence. In 2018, there was at least talk of help. Now, there are no new bailouts, just vague statements about considering support. The USDA is warning that farm income could drop by more than $40 billion this year, the sharpest decline in a generation. Banks are tightening credit. Equipment orders are being canceled. Co-ops are reporting fewer fertilizer sales. Warning signs are everywhere, but the help isn't coming. And through all this, the heartland waits. Fields grow wild. Barns empty. The world isn't waiting for America to fix itself. China, the EU, Mexico, and other countries are building new supply chains, finding new partners, and writing off the U.S. as an unreliable source. The result? The places that built America's food economy are now being left behind. But the real heartbreak, the part no one in Washington wants to talk about, is what's happening on the ground in rural America. While politicians argue over tariff policy, farmers in Iowa are selling off their herds. In Kentucky, soybean acres are being abandoned or swapped for wheat, anything just to survive. In Texas, the irrigation pumps run less and less, each dollar of diesel measured against a future that looks grimmer by the day. In California, even the largest dairy co-ops are starting to warn. If exports collapse again, we'll see a wave of consolidation that wipes out generations of family businesses. And it's already happening, just more quietly than ever before. The numbers are staggering, but they don't capture the human cost. Since 2018, Black-owned farms have declined by over 8%. Indigenous farming operations have shrunk by nearly 10%. Women-led farms, already a minority, have seen their share of total farm revenue cut in half. Every new round of tariffs is like a tidal wave, sweeping away the smallest, most vulnerable operators first. Trump himself has gone on record saying, "Let farmers sell to American buyers instead." But here's the harsh truth. Domestic demand isn't nearly enough. Only 60% of U.S. soy, half of all dairy, and less than half of some pork cuts are consumed in the States. Exports aren't a bonus, they're a lifeline. And as that lifeline frays, so do the communities built around it. Across the South and Midwest, farmers are fighting back, holding town halls, pushing their state reps, even traveling to Washington to plead their case. But their message isn't trending on social media. There are no viral clips of grain elevators sitting empty or milk trucks turned away at the dairy. Their reality is quieter, lonelier, a foreclosure notice in the mailbox, another unpaid invoice at the co-op, the hum of a grain dryer in an empty field. Meanwhile, America's place in the world's food system is crumbling. Former trade partners aren't waiting for the next deal. They're already moving on. China is locking in supply contracts with Brazil and Europe. Mexico is buying grain from Argentina. The EU is ramping up its own self-sufficiency, no longer counting on American reliability. The U.S. is now seen as a risky supplier, volatile, unpredictable, politicized. And once the trust is gone, it's almost impossible to win it back. Even the biggest farm groups are warning of permanent damage. The American Farm Bureau says 20% of farm income comes from exports, and that losing those markets could push thousands more farms to the brink. The National Farmers Union calls the current strategy reckless. The American Soybean Association, once a solid Trump supporter, now says every new tariff could erase decades of market share, maybe for good. Relationships, once lost, don't come back easily. So what does all this mean for the future? Rural communities, the bedrock of America's food security, are being hollowed out faster than most people realize. The hope, the only hope, lies in recognition and real action before it's too late. Because while the rest of the country argues about politics and points fingers, the people who feed America are asking a simple, painful question. Is this what winning was supposed to look like? If you care about the future of America's farms, don't let this story disappear in silence. Like, subscribe, and share, because this is one crisis that affects us all, whether we see it or not.